Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I am your host, Mookie Spitz, and I am the bald one, and we are talking to Jill Strickman. She is the ambitious one. She is the founder and chief strategic officer of Genuine Real People. And when we're talking genuine and we're talking real people, I thought it would be particularly relevant in this age of AI revolution and nonstop AI everywhere to have a nice conversation with someone who has been recruiting and managing and vesting real people for some of the biggest ads that you've already seen. And I'll pass the baton to Jill in a second, but she has found real people that have appeared in Super Bowl ads and for some of the biggest brands on the planet, in addition to advocacy organizations and many of the most famous campaigns that have hit broadcast television and the internet. Welcome aboard, Jill.
Hello, Mookie.
Thank you for making time. And as I'm mentioning, AI, I know that it's the revolution. It is the paradigm shift, not only of our generation, but probably the biggest one since the internet, but it's exhausting. And part of the reason that I'm personally exhausted by it is not only has it become its own cliche, however important, but I feel like we're missing things. We're all so excited about automating our virtual selves to the point where the machines are taking over virtually everything that we do. What's being lost in all this? And I think what's being lost is the human connection, the human touch. When a brand, when a product or service is putting out messaging, putting out a campaign, they're seeking emotional connection and connectivity with its audience. And people are people, and people love other people. Can you describe what it's like to do what you do for the last 35 years or so in terms of finding actual people to be in some of the messaging and campaigns for some of the world's biggest brands?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. It's my favorite topic. so, AI is ever present, and I love AI. I use it all the time. AI is like my smart green assistant. I always describe it. But, as human beings, it's like so basic. We yearn for connection. Um, we're emotional beings, and emotional stories and other people are what we connect to. We may be entertained or enjoy, something animated or something that's been created, but something that resonates to our heart and soul and emotional being, like nothing can replace that. And there's so much power in it. And in advertising, there's no better way to move people to action, to get them to pay attention and relate, than to have another person sharing their story or their vulnerability. So I think it's our stories and our humanness is ever present and really important. And I think AI and human beings and human stories can coexist together.
Tell us the difference, though, between real people, which is what you do, and ostensibly what we might want to call fake people. And from my understanding, brands historically hire actors who read scripts to capture the message of a company, whether it's Flo from Progressive. Flo from Progressive isn't a real woman named Flo who works at Progressive. She's an actress whom they hire, and they give her a script, and she's become iconic and almost synonymous with Progressive, but she is not a real person. Can you give us a little context in terms of what it means to to find and cast real people for advertising?
I mean, the biggest difference is you're looking for someone with a real person. It's who they are in their lives. So, and how they identify. So they could be a mother, a daughter, a businesswoman, a soccer player, a mechanic, a engineer. There's someone who is living in their life and they're experiencing things from their heart and soul. Like, whereas an actor is transforming into a character that's been imagined by somebody else. And, I mean, actors are amazing. It's interesting. Sometimes we'll cast real people and a client will want them to read a script. And often we'll say, you know what, use an actor because real people that's a skill, like a real skill and an art and a talent. Whereas we want real people to be themselves and to share from their hearts and experiences, not from trying to pretend to be somebody else. So I think that's the distinction. You know, a real person is who they are. They're being themselves, whereas an actor is using their skills and their talents to create a person who's been imagined and invented by somebody else or written by somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like real people casting for these campaigns is analogous to blurring the line, if you will, between a testimonial and a formal campaign. So when you see a testimonial is I'm Mookie Spitz and I love this shaving cream for shaving my bald head. So that's a testimonial. I have a product or service I self identify with. I might be used by the brand as an influencer and an advocate, and I'm a happy customer and I'm sharing my happiness with the world. And that way it bridges trust and it creates a relationship, not so much between the brand and its audience, but one of the advocates and fans and users of that brand with the audience. And in your case, it sounds like to me, you are finding and vetting and managing real people who in some way are reflective of the brand and its benefits and what it means in terms of creating that flattering reflection for its consumer. Does that sound right?
Yeah, well, I think real people can humanize brands. It's interesting you talk about testimonials. In our work, I would say for the first, I don't know, 25 years of my business, we primarily did testimonials where someone actually had to use a specific product. And we still do some of that, but it's often someone who aligns with the values that a brand is trying to communicate. So it could be something like American Expresses did, a web series where they had brick and mortar businesses who were struggling with some aspect of their business, and they bring in an expert to help them, and they go through the whole process. So it's the value of looking at a company and identifying places where they need help and helping them grow and thrive. American Express is associated with that, versus me using an iPhone and talking about the features of the iPhone. Or it might be like I'm a photographer, and I instead of using a 35 millimeter camera, I'm now using the iPhone for all my professional work. Eh, the way in is different now than it used to be. Um,
That's a fascinating distinction. So to cite your iPhone analogy, when you look at a conventional Apple ad, they're really focused on the device. There often aren't even people in it. It's like, look how thin it is, look how sleek it is, and look at the various colors that you can get it in. What you're talking about is making an emotional connection between, let's say, Apple and its consumers, not so much by featuring the phone and its advantages from a engineering perspective, but from an experiential
Yes.
perspective. And it gets even more meta than that. It's not like, hey, look at me looking at, working the iPhone. Look at, I'm so happy using its new features. But I am an entrepreneur. I am an architect. I am so and such. And when I do my thing, I tend to use Apple because Apple makes my experience of doing my job so much better.
Yes, that I would say that that is a very popular. Like, how is the service or the product making my life better? Like, it's integrated into my life and what I'm doing versus focusing just on the product itself.
That's fascinating. And it goes back to how we started this conversation about AI. And I think it further reinforces the need for that ghost in the machine, if you will. It's not about featuring the product or service qualities. And it's not even about showing a person using them, but it's about the person's human emotional experience benefiting from a product, solving problems in their life with this product or
Mhm.
service, and benefiting from that, showing joy in overcoming this issue, and just by chance, in a sense, they use that product or service.
Yeah, interestingly, we did a project for a phone company over the holidays where we had to find people who had voicemails from people who had passed away, who, loved ones. So, it was an interesting person, and it was about like valuing, that we have these voicemails from people that we love and we can save them. And that whole emotional, it's products create connection, just in incorporating these products and technologies into our lives, they can enhance connection and love and feelings of community.
Yeah, and I've been talking to a lot of people in various verticals, and everyone expresses this terror almost of AI taking away the jobs of the people they represent, but also their own. And I have a feeling that the backlash to the backlash of this AI revolution is for humans to crave other humans like never before. And I just have a hunch that you have some job security here, because you could create a synthetic character. Movies now are bringing dead actors to life dynamically within a new movie script. We're seeing this over and over again. And at first, it was kind of clunky. I remember the Star Wars series brought back Carrie Fisher, and it was kind of creepy to see her there, and it looked kind of fake. But they're getting better to the point where it's seamless. You can't even tell that this actor has been deceased for 10 years, and there they are in the film. But
Yes.
but I cannot even imagine AI creating a air quote real person who's experiencing the benefit of a product, no matter how real it seems. People need a human to human connection.
Yeah, well, people, this is sort of cliche, but people want to feel seen, heard, and understood. And they want to feel like someone got them. Although, some people might say that AI understands them, but uh, it's interesting you bring up putting, AI people in ads with, like, or in films. There is a Brazilian spot where there was a famous Brazilian singer who died, and then her daughter is now a famous Brazilian singer. And I think it was for a VW ad, and they created a spot where they were like in cars next to each other singing. Um, so the mom who has passed away, who is dead, is with the young woman today. It's kind of creepy, but
Yeah, they brought back Tupac Shakur, the rapper, in concert as a holographic performer on stage. So they're literally bringing back the dead, not only in
Yeah,
advertising but in entertainment as
I
well. And
know.
we're going to see more and more and more of
Well,
this.
maybe this is like a spiritual thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
because people pass, but people feel them still, in their lives and around them, and
And I think, to your point, I love AI too. And frankly, this is a separate topic, but I'm fairly Pollyanna. Until AI takes away everyone's jobs and destroys the human race, I think it's going to be a good time. That's my opinion. But there are tremendous benefits to this stuff. But one of the downsides that I'll admit to too is this dehumanization of even the basic kinds of human to human connection. And what I find wonderful about what you do is that you have based your entire career on forging this human human connection between brands and their customers. And I think it's particularly important now, and that's why I have you on in this age of the machines taking over and doing what we do not only as well as what we do, but better. And I think we'll always have a need for real people expressing real enthusiasm and solving real problems for their lives through products and services that
Mhm.
that that I think marketers will be able to tap into and should.
Yes, and it's sharing their stories, their compelling stories, and their vulnerability, and um, you know what makes them. All about the relating to this other person. Like you see yourself in them, or you find them inspiring, or motivating, or even you feel empathy for them. It's like a reciprocal loop with another person, that can be created through watching a piece, a spot. It makes you feel. It's about feeling something. So here's the question: can AI make us feel something?
I
Maybe.
Maybe I think it does to a certain extent. I mean, remember the movie Her with
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson as the voice of the AI, and he falls in love with his bot
Yeah.
until she wanders off with the other bots. Spoiler alert, giving up on humanity. I love that movie because it wasn't like the machines were taking over humanity. They were just bored with us, and they and
Yes.
they moved on, and he was heartbroken. Don't leave me. And
Yeah.
now there's a plethora of bots that become companions in
Yeah, and
every
when
way that's imaginable,
yeah, and
right?
even with the elderly,
Yes.
robots that help take care of
Yeah.
the elderly. I mean, there's another movie, I think it was called like Frank, about that. But yeah, so I mean, there's overlap and there's gray areas, but there's nothing like the real thing of being with another person, and then also sensory. We live through our phones now, which is unfortunate, because we communicate with other people, but we're not using all our senses when we're communicating. Whereas when you're with someone in person, the five senses are activated and alive, and you're receiving information in so many, and communicating on so many different levels, and that isn't the case through our phones necessarily, or through AI. So it's this aliveness, like feeling alive, and that real people bring that out in us.
Absolutely. And you mentioned storytelling as being foundational. And nobody tells stories better than people telling stories to other people. A lot of the stories we tell each other are repetitive and frankly kind of uninteresting. What makes the story fun and what makes the joke funny isn't the joke itself, but essentially the person telling it and how it's told.
Absolutely.
If you look at the transcripts of some of the funniest routines ever, you give it a little chuckle. But when Chris Rock is up there doing it in this tone of this Southern preacher screaming at the audience and carrying on, you're busting up laughing because it's the human experience. There's an individual up there who went through experiences, is sharing those experiences, and you're sharing the Schadenfreude and irony of a shared experience. And I think that's what you bring with storytelling being at its center.
Yes, and when you look at storytelling, I mean, from the beginning of time, people sat around a fire and shared stories. And to your point, two people can tell the same story, and one is totally captivating, and the other one is going to put you to sleep. So
Yeah.
that speaks to our humanness and how we interact and share. Not everyone can tell an incredible story, but it's also how we pass on our culture, our family histories, and you're talking about a lot of people repeating stories. It's because it's emphasizing certain messages and values that people want to share those stories. Um,
Absolutely. And you have a compelling story. So if it's okay with you, we could segue a little bit into your story. Apparently you've got the company now for 35 years, which is in and
I
of
think it's
itself.
33 years. Don't make me older than I am.
No, I'm giving you even more kudos for being a sole entrepreneur with an agency that has flourished for more than 3 decades. So
Yeah,
can
yeah.
you tell us a little bit about your origin story, how Genuine came to be, and what it's like? And I think our listeners would love to hear what it's like for a woman to start a company literally from scratch and go through the trials and tribulations of, in a sense, evolving in parallel and through the biggest revolutions in communication, in advertising, and marketing ever in human history. I mean, all these things happen concurrently with your agency. Internet, phones, social media,
Social media,
yeah,
influencers. Yes,
influencers. You've seen it
you're right.
all, and you've
Yeah,
evolved every step of the way with
yeah.
this basic value proposition of bringing real people into brand identity.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I had my best year last year, and I've been asked like, how has UGC and affected your business, and brands still need expertise in researching, vetting, finding, and working with real people to tell the stories that they want to tell. But my story is basically, um, I had studied photography, and I wanted to be a portrait photographer, and got a job working with a sort of a famous photographer named Neil Slavin, who was known for his work with finding groups, and the theme of his work was belonging. And he hired me to initially to be a technical assistant, but I really wasn't technical. I was kind of a big disaster in the technical part, but I was very organized. I had producer skills, and he always wanted real people, and we discovered together that I was somehow really good at finding them. So when I first
Oh,
started
he
work,
he was a successful portrait photographer. Is that right?
he was a group photographer,
Group photographer, right?
but very
Group portrait photographer. So you had to find people for his group photographs.
photographs. Yes.
Okay, great,
So
great.
when I first started working with him, he was doing a campaign for European American Bank on Long Island, and we were looking for groups and clubs in Long Island. I literally spent an entire summer going out to the island every day, meeting with groups, everything from like the Golden Songsters to the Railroad Club to, I mean, every kind of group you could imagine. And going out, and I had a video camera at the time and a Polaroid camera, and I would come in the morning, and he'd give me my assignment of what I had to do, and I remember thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to find this, but I would find it.
So
And
he had you finding real people who fit particular criteria. I think this is important for the listeners to understand that going back to your Neil Slavin days, who, by the way, is the uncle of Steve Stevens, the guitar player for Billy Idol. See,
yeah,
I did some research here. Anyway, so Neil Slavin had you finding real people out there in the world, pre-digital, pre-internet, who fit particular criteria.
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So he set a
S-
precedent, like an operating model for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's like I always say, I learned that, in the word impossible is impossible. Like it's all possible if you know, you get out there and are creative and strategic to find and connect. It was all about finding people and connecting with them, getting them to trust me so I could explain the project we were working on and then share themselves. And then, he had incredible projects. He worked for all the top magazines and he was doing a lot of commercials at the time. So we did a huge campaign for MCI when the whole friends and family. Um, yeah, I don't know if you remember that Friends and Family came out. It was going up against the
Now you're
campaign.
saying I'm old.
I know. Yeah, it's a long time. But I so I learned that I was good at this. Who knew? Who knew this even existed? So what happened is he and I parted ways and I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't intending to start a company and I was just reaching out to everyone I had worked with and I had worked with an agency on this MCI campaign and the producer um I was on the phone with the producer and she's like, "Oh my God, I got something on my desk and they want to do this with business customers. What you did with Neil, could you do it with business customers?" And I remember saying yes and hanging up the phone. I did not have a computer. I had nothing. I like literally had nothing. And I remember calling my father, who's a business entrepreneurial businessman, saying, "I just got this project and I don't like I have to record conversations. I didn't even know where to start." So he's like, "You have a credit card?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have a credit card." He says, "Well, go out and buy the equipment you need," because I needed um, phone recorders and I needed cameras. And I ended up hiring all my graduate school friends. And they gave me these lists and I set everybody up in their homes. This is before, um, this was remote work before remote work was a thing. And I pulled off the project. And they were really happy and they wanted me to do more for their agency. And I said a lot of it was calling people. And I said I didn't have enough phone lines. And the one of the chief creative officers, I was in a meeting. He's like, "Oh, we'll get you phone lines. Give her a conference room. Put it on as many phone lines as she wants." So basically, I started my company out of an ad agency doing their projects for this big telecommunications company, and it was like a one client thing. And I hired my friends who were mostly, had flexible schedules, but I didn't have anything in place. So it was like, "Oh, I have to pay people. What do I do?" Yeah, you need to get a payroll service. Like, "Oh, I have to, for billing, I needed an accountant, I needed a lawyer, I needed to incorporate it." Everything was flying by the seat of my pants and just getting what I needed to do the job. And that sustained me for about 2 years. And then the company merged and then they kind of kicked me out. And then I ended up, my boyfriend at the time was a photographer and he had a studio in Tribeca. So I went and I like rented out his studio. So I was working from his studio and one thing led to another and I started getting more work and it's been going ever since and I've had to learn. um I've always said I wish I could go back and get a master's in business, but I probably know it all already. I had to learn how to read a P&L. I had to, learn just so many different things, profit margins, marketing, yeah, every aspect of the business.
Yeah, so you got a real life MBA. And
Yes.
it sounds like to me you're a great combination of grit, flexibility and really improvisation. So from the moment,
with a touch of anxiety.
of course, well, that sounds like your fuel. You are
My
fueled
fuel.
by anxiety. I am fueled by irreverence and creativity. I think you are fueled by anxiety.
By worry. Not
Worry.
as much now, but back then for sure.
That's terrific. So just to summarize, this famous photographer who does group photography hires you to be a technician, like a photographer, and you're not very good at that, but you're great at doing some of the logistical planning stuff, namely finding real people who fit particular criteria. You knock it out of the park with him, but then you move on. An opportunity seems to fall into your lap for doing similar stuff for an agency for a bigger campaign. That seems to work out. And then you take things to the next level and eventually start your own business doing exactly that, finding real people for brands who fit particular criteria. And you've kept your grit and your scrappiness and continued, fueled by your anxiousness to do a good job.
Yeah, we're
And
not so
that, and
scrappy anymore.
okay, all right. Well, so
I have.
let the listeners know a little bit about Genuine right now.
Well, so now I have an executive producer, I have a head of production, I have a CFO, I have a head of business development, I have project managers and researchers. So it's not so scrappy or flying by the seat of our pants anymore. We have a proven process. We have a lot, we do a lot with privacy and security because we're dealing with people's personal information, especially health information. So we have tremendous systems in place to protect people's information. Yeah, so we're very structured now. Um, we have to be, and we do a lot in the healthcare space. So we really need to make sure we're buttoned up, and we are. Um, and yeah, so it's emerged. But to your point, what's interesting is through these 30 plus years, my business has always been successful. Like I've always made a living, and this year was like a banner year. So even with all the changes, the the demand for real people, compelling people, with stories to share is not, people are like, oh, it's trendy or it's a new thing. It's like, no, it's not a new thing. It goes all the way back to Alan Funt and his show. Do you
What
remember
was
that
it? The
show?
candid camera,
Candid
right?
Camera.
Candid. See how old I am now.
Yes. But it really, this stuff goes all the way back to Candid Camera, which sort of there was which was pranking people, and then years later the reality television, there's tons of pranking that goes on, um, which we've had projects where we've had surprises and pranks too. But yeah, so it is interesting because it hasn't gone away, and it's significant. The demand for it is significant. And I have had a thriving company for 30 plus years.
Well, that's no
Doing-
accident. I mean, you could have a high volume market and still tank. So, what is your secret sauce? I'm assuming that you've got your own bevy of competition, right? You've got other companies who are doing real people
yeah,
casting.
sure.
So what's your differentiation? One of the themes of my podcast series here is selling consultatively, is differentiation, is positioning, and is that secret sauce that sellers bring in to a market to be successful. So, if you could characterize the Genuine Real People brand, uh, share your pitch. Like if you're,
Well,
you're working with a client, what makes your agency special?
I'm laughing because what I'm going to tell you is something that you and I talked about years ago that you sort of came up with that is now, or like how I frame it, which is
Listeners, the self-serving nature of this podcast has just been revealed. I've been trying to fly under the radar this whole time. But
but that I
go
what I
go
was
go
gonna
ahead. You couldn't
what
help yourself,
I
but go
couldn't,
ahead.
but
Yeah.
what I was going to say this is so what our secret sauce is that we are compliant and compassionate. So you can have your compliance and compassion too. And that goes across the board. And the reason that's important is we're working with very large corporations that really need to make sure we are following proper FTC and FDA protocols, that we are in private security and privacy is huge. And at the same time, we are, you know, wholehearted, open human beings who really care and hold space for the people we meet. And the other one is that, which you're going to laugh, is trust at every level. That people trust us, we trust them, and that's how we build relationships for brands.
Well, that's wonderful. Again, and it sounds like it's the two sides of things that people don't always combine, at least initially thinking about real people casting, which is finding and vetting and managing these people. Got that. But there's an operational side to what you do, which is particularly important for, as you mentioned, a highly regulated environment. And I know that you do a lot of work in the healthcare vertical. And what many people don't realize to this day is that the life science companies, pharmaceutical companies, health companies in general are very restricted in terms of what can and cannot be said. So
Yes,
when you're
yes.
combining that restriction with actual people in an organic environment, it could get messy and it could be highly problematic for companies who are otherwise highly risk averse.
Yes, and I think, that's what's so funny when people talk about pharma, like, you know, big bad pharma. I'm like, I feel like it's so we have to be so buttoned up and make sure like we're following every rule and regulation, like with all the companies I work with, interestingly enough. Um, so I do think, what one thing that we do talk about too, because we are compliant and buttoned up, it makes people feel safe so that they can open up to us. They know that we're not going to just like take their words or their stories and just take advantage of them. Again, it's all about establishing trust. And by knowing that their information is safe with us, they're giving us permission to share their stories. We always have to have them fill out a release explaining who will be seeing this and who won't be seeing this. Um, we are trustworthy, and that's really important to me as a person. Like I couldn't sleep at night if we didn't operate that way. Um, what's interesting about the company too is it's very much a reflection of who I am and the way I interact with people, including, mostly my staff, the culture we have, and, the respect we have for each other and how we listen and care. And that sort of reverberates in everything we do.
Yeah, your retention, your employee retention is astonishing. Now, especially in the marketing and advertising Madison Avenue world, especially when you consider the holding companies, the mergers and acquisitions, and the constant, never-ending swirl that's endemic in the ecosystems of these messaging companies. You have incredible turnover, which is almost expected. You have mass layoffs, you have rehires, and oftentimes it's with the shifting winds of big and small accounts. Scalability is one of the major challenges for agencies in general. You need a lot of people for a lot of work. The work vaporizes or shifts, people come and go. With your company, though, can you tell us a little bit about your staff? Because from what I can tell, you've had people with you for a long time,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I have
they're
had
loyal. It's like a family environment.
Yeah. So Jennifer Kitchen, who's my executive producer, She's been working with me for over 25 years. She's worked in different capacities. I guess the last maybe 7 to 10 years, she's been the executive producer. My now CFO, Angelique's been with me for 10 years. My head of business development, 10 years. We have one of our top project managers, Lucy Locke, over 10 years. Yeah, many people have been with me for a decade or more. And most of them are creative people, and many are mothers, or or have other creative people who have other things going on. So part of our culture is flexibility. So I always say, and now we are now, we used to have we had an office in Manhattan for over 30 years, and now we have a remote model. And the rule is always applied, like, as long as you get your work done well and the client's needs are met, I don't care how you do it. Like, if you need to take 2 hours during the day, or, as long as the work is done at a really high quality. And it is. And yeah, so giving
You're,
people.
that this is a very important point, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but right now, corporations, large and small, are grappling with the post-COVID wave of forcing their employees back to work. And I think the rationale is what you mentioned, that of ostensibly lost productivity. You got people hanging out at home, they're walking the dog, they're going to the gym. And there's a tacit assumption that they're no longer as productive as if they would commute back and forth to an office, a physical location, and plug in over there. And to me, what it sounds like, in order for remote work to work, you already need an established relationship, a sense of community, a sense of family, and a sense of loyalty and dedication to your job. And if you have that, if you have a sense that you take pride in your work and you work hard, it really doesn't matter where the hell you are, as long as the job gets done well, and you feel a connection and a sense of pride in the work that you're doing.
I think that's true. I mean, I think, to our point about real people and connecting, I think there are huge advantages of people working together in person. I actually think in my opinion, a hybrid model is probably the best.
Yeah.
Um, and we do try to gather, but we probably could gather more. But I do think people, from what I've seen, I think it's very hard for young people to be working remotely, because I think you learn so much just from observing people and being in meetings and watching how people problem solve and negotiate, and I think if you're not in person, you lose that. But if you are senior and you've been doing it for a long time, um, that's not as important. But I think that people who are, if you give people responsibility, and and they honor what they do, I actually think people work harder um, when they're remote. Because I remember even me going into the office. Like, I went in the office, and then, like, I'd sit and have a conversation with someone in the office for whatever, a half hour, about, I don't know, like, the time was much looser in terms of how it was spent, whereas now at home I'm very focused on getting up and working. And then if I do something else, like stopping, and I don't know, it's different. So before, I was in an office, so it all counted as work. Whereas that,
Yeah. You can't waste a lot of time at the water cooler or in the kitchen when no one else is there.
whereas when I think when you're working from remotely from home, you realize, like, oh, I'm not working right now, versus if I was in an office, I would feel like, oh, I'm at work.
Yeah.
So, um,
And most of your touch points with clients are video conferencing and the like, right? You have
yeah, it's all video.
it's all
Mhm.
video. And most significantly, and I think our listeners would be fascinated by this, your interviews with prospective real people candidates for these campaigns, the nuts and bolts of what you do. are also virtual.
Yes, which is a huge shift. We used to go out. I used to travel all over the country interviewing people, or we'd have like sessions where we'd bring people in or rent a hotel room, or and um and people would come in person. And now it's all remote. It's all Zoom interviews, um, or whatever platform we're using. Um, yeah, so it's very interesting how that's shifted. And again, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. Um, Sometimes when people are talking through on Zoom and they're in their homes, they feel more comfortable to reveal themselves than if they were in a an unfamiliar environment. Yet when you're with someone in person, the connection brings out other things. So, with all of this, it's not black and white. But we're just, adapting to our high tech world the best we can.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've adapted both externally and internally. Externally, in terms of rolling with the punches and taking advantage of this evolution from broadcast media to digital to mobile to social. And in parallel, you've been taking advantage of the digital technology for the nuts and bolts of doing what you do, which is the actual interviewing process and vetting of the real people for these digital, ostensibly broadcast and digital campaigns.
Yes, for sure. It's interesting because the categories have even shifted. Like, um, I was on a call with a client yesterday, even, and we were talking about they have a spot that we worked on, and I said, "Oh, is it going to be on broadcast?" And they said, "Actually, no, it's going to be streaming on all the streaming services." And it's like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. Like, there's a distinction between being on broadcast versus being on Netflix and Hulu and there's it's a different space. um
And it's
yeah,
huge.
it's huge, huge.
Enormous. The musical storyteller on YouTube, Rick Beato. He had an episode where he's mentioning that he has trouble getting some of the super duper triple A list rock stars on his show, like Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, because his handlers don't understand that a guy like Rick Beato, many listeners here might never have even heard this guy, but because of the power of digital, he literally has tens of billions of views.
Mm,
So I think the brave new world for everyone in marketing and advertising is this fragmented, crazy, but hyper engaged universe of streaming, of platforms, of all the different ways that people are absorbing information and therefore absorbing brand content.
yes, and understanding who's watching what, and who your audience is.
Yeah, wonderful. And speaking of content, I know you've done several Super Bowl ads, which right now it's $8 million for a 30-second spot. And going back years, you're this scrappy New York agency. Your physical location, I think, was in an old hospital, right? And
Oh, yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
West Broadway. But you were doing the most high profile advertising on planet Earth, the Super Bowl ads. Your real people were going in Super Bowl ads a long time ago. Can you share some of your favorite campaigns and maybe even some apocryphal and funny stories of
Oh
working
boy.
you've worked with celebrities. You have your own blooper reel of things going wrong in sometimes the funniest possible way. But can we cap this with a few examples, because you have such a rich portfolio, not only of high profile ads and super nuanced ads for advocacy groups and the whatnot, but being in this business with real people for so long, there's a few things I think our listeners would just get a giggle and a chin scratch from if you could share those.
Oh boy, there's so many.
Yeah.
It's hard for me.
Mm.
For super, it's funny, the Super Bowl ads or things, for all the big sporting events. We've had so many. The one w- Head and Shoulders did a campaign once where we had to find people who had very like obscure businesses. So one guy had this business with goats where the goats would come and eat the recycling at someone's house, like he'd bring or the weeds in the lawn.
Yeah, I'm actually chuckling. People can't see me, but that's very funny.
So
It's
or there
a
was
goat recycler.
yes, so would come with his goats. So we did him, and then there was a woman who, had one of these smash rooms where people go in when they're, you go in and you smash. Have you ever been in one of those rooms?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah, yeah. You might be anxious, and I'm full of a righteous rage all the time, so they're good for me.
Yeah, those smash rooms. She had a business. Um, so there were all these very like obscure businesses. So that was a fun one. Um, Oh, I mean, our most recent campaign that got the most attention was not something funny. It was Dove Cost of Beauty, which featured a young woman who had an eating disorder and attributes it to her interaction with social media growing up. And it's a beautiful film about, you know, her mother is singing "You Are So Beautiful to Me," and and we used her footage from her childhood and from her phone and told her story. And it was, a Dove self-esteem campaign, which motivated people to, sign uh, petitions to try to curb social media from, to protect children from it. Um, and that was just like it won every award. And,
That sounds
whenever,
powerful. It sounds like something a bot just couldn't do.
yes, that story. Yes. And even using all the new technology where we can use footage, from someone's past and images and photographs and family scenes. And it's still about the human element. Yes. So again, it's about people's experiences and triumphing through them, going through something really challenging and then, overcoming it is, something that people like to see because we all struggle, right? Like we all go through,
Yeah, it's showing the vulnerability. It's I saw also that when you do some pitching in person, you actually hand out tissues, branded genuine tissues so that when people cry watching your campaigns with real people, they're able to dab at their tears
yeah,
of
if people,
sadness and joy. I think that's
yeah,
brilliant.
if people want to see is some of the work, they can go to my website, which
Yeah,
is
we'll put the link. We'll
yeah,
put the link in
genuine,
the
the real people
description.
company.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
then
there's the work and bring your tissues. Yeah,
yeah.
that's what we're known for. This is the key. We're known for emotional work, which is at the, this sort of comes around full circle. You know, we're known for work that can make people cry. Now, can AI generated ads make people cry? I don't know. Have you ever cried from seeing something from AI?
I've cried when my kids have obsessively played video games. But I don't know. We'll see. Eventually, there's going to be an AGI, an artificial general intelligence. Eventually, we'll get to the point. I'm a firm believer that the machines will be sentient like we are, and when we reach that point, we'll naturally be able to share empathy, but by that point it might be too late for humanity. For the time being, I still think that's a ways off, and I think there's no substitute for real people in real ads talking about real problems and framing their own experiences through the lens of the qualities of a brand that make that human connection. That's what we do in marketing and advertising. That's the heart of consultative selling, and that's what you've been doing so successfully for more than 3 decades.
Yes, yes, indeed. and I'm going to
So
keep going.
keep going. So thank you so much for your time. We'll have links to Jill's website and some. You have a gallery on your site, is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah,
Where
they
people.
can people can look at work. Yes, definitely.
Okay,
And they could
can
sign up for our database if they want to, our mail, where it's actually a mailing list. Our mailing list so they can find out about projects because maybe they'll qualify to be in one of our campaigns.
So yeah, that's another point, which is obviously you do outreach to clients, existing clients, of which you have many, many hundreds over the years across many, many verticals. But you also reach out to people because you need a database of interesting people doing interesting things. And if you connect with Jill, you might find yourself on a Super Bowl ad. I remember the woman with the puppets.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, or the woman who quit her job.
Who quit
That
her
was a Super
job
Bowl. She quit her
eh,
job on on
on live on
on the Super
GBD on
at
the
the
Super
Super Bowl.
Bowl.
That was for
Yeah,
GoDaddy.
for GoDaddy, which is you can take this job and S it, and
Yes.
then she does her own thing with her
And
own
yeah,
website.
with her own
Right,
website with the
right,
puppets.
right.
Yes, the woman
Yeah,
who that was a big Super Bowl.
that
Remember
was a
that?
huge one. And to me, what tugged my heartstrings, just as a postscript, is the British Airways
Oh,
ad with the. You could please tell us about that. I lost my mom when I was young, and I almost have a tear in my eye thinking about that ad. Honestly, this is zero BS. That ad moved me, I think, like no other because of, again, my own mother, and it was just so genuine. Can you talk a little bit about that ad as we sign off?
so we had to find um a young person, a man or a woman, who was from Mumbai and had was living in the United States, and who had a mother who was still in Mumbai. And what they told the mother was that they wanted her to cook for her son, and they were going to fly the meal to the United States. So she was cooking the meal, and then the time came for the person from British Airways to come pick up the food, and they flew her son in, and he was the one who showed up. Um, and it was just beautifully done and so emotional. So she had been cooking for her son all day, but she didn't think she'd see him, and she hadn't seen him in like 10 years. So it was just beautifully
Yeah,
done.
and then BA flew the son. So as the mom is finishing preparation of the meal that she was ostensibly going to send to her son, in walked her son.
Yes, yeah. It was
Wow.
incredible. It was a
That's a
beautiful spot.
take that, Chat GPT.
Well, yeah, it's about our relationships, right? Our
Yeah, and
connections and our relationships
the
with
story
people.
that told of separation and loss and love, and this
And to
goes.
your point, the mother-son connection, like, or
Yes, yes.
the mother-child connection.
And tying it back to the brand, which is what is an airline. This is what's great about this stuff. And from an advertiser, from a marketing strategist, the old school way of advertising a brand would be, we're British Airways and we get you there on time. And we're British Airways and we have the most comfortable seats in the industry. But this takes it to a whole new level, which is, we're not just a company that has these big machines that fly you at 600 miles per hour across a continent, but we are a company that connects humans together. And we're a company that can unite a son with his mother after they've been apart for 10 years. That's the secret sauce of marketing. That's
Mm,
how you make a connection. And I think that real people will be indispensable forever to do that.
yes. Yes. Amen. Let's hope so.
Woohoo! Well, that'll keep you
Woohoo.
going. Anyway,
Yes.
thanks so much for your time, Jill. I appreciate the links are in the episode below. Thank you so much to the listeners of the Bald Ambition podcast. I
Can
hope
I say one more thing? I just want to
you
say
can
one more
say
thing.
as many
So,
things as you want.
since the cat's out of the bag, you are the one who named my company.
Shh.
I had gotten divorced and my old company was my married name and I wanted to change it. And so we were brainstorming for a long time and then you came up with the name. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a Malcolm Gladwell blink. I was in a hotel room traveling for business, and I literally reached over to turn on the little bedstand light. And as I'm fumbling for the switch, the light bulb literally came in my head. It was a blink moment where what's the epitome of what you do? And it is genuineness. It's making a genuine connection between people and other people and between brands and the people that they are trying to serve. So thank you for the little postscript there. And it was my pleasure to do that. And I also told you to get the Super Bowl ads onto your damn website.
Well, yeah, well, yeah,
There you are. This
rebranded everything.
yeah, this company that's doing Super Bowl ads, casting for Super Bowl ads, and you're oh, yeah, oh by the way, we do Super Bowl ads. So good for you. Knock them out. Thanks so much again. Thanks again for listening, and we'll
Yes.
be
And
hosting other folks like Jill in verticals across the board with companies small and large, focused on the art of consultative selling, focused on the art of brands and brand identity, and basically making connections, genuine connections, people to people, to make all of our lives better and doing it in a way where marketing strategists can learn and blush.
bravo.
Bravo. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mookie. Bye.
Bye.